Lenore, Wayne had sent a link out for YouTube,
Oh, okay. All right.
and
Well,
I
that's
think I
good.
put it on the listserv yesterday after he
Okay.
shared it with me.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mary. So this is actually our third session. We're going to go back a little bit and go back through the grants.gov interface. I've received a lot of calls and questions about that. That seems to be a hot number for everybody. And the problem lies is if you're not in grants.gov, oh, sorry, y'all. Um, then you're going to struggle because that's where your submission has to take place. So, again, the question for everybody is you need to know internally who is the AOR. So it's the authorized organizational representative that can hit send on your application. They're the ones you can do and upload things and input information, but that person, whether they give you access or they give you passwords or they themselves have to do it, you need to find out internally what that process is. But here's the information on grants.gov. You would come here to log in. Everybody has to have their own individual account um, to be able to get in. I use, and they have all of these other little portals, because it's all heightened security and all of these federal portals now. Um, Login.gov. And so for me, I have all my stuff saved. And it automatically brings me here. This is under the applicant tab. And you go into, if you've already completed, and I would hope most people have already done this. If you haven't, you need to do it ASAP. But in workspaces, which is where you do your grant submissions, um, being able to get in. So you would manage your workspaces. I just always hit search because it pulls that all up for me. Um, and then we'll come here. This is the VR grant. I have a dummy application sitting there. Just still letting folks in, and you'll hit manage. And if I'm going too fast for anyone, just stop me. We're okay with going back and that kind of stuff. But when you get into manage is when you get into the different components. Yep. Somebody was saying something. Okay. So this will give you all of the information, all of the forms. So your SF424, you enter the data straight in here. So these are not uploads. So don't fill out the 424 on another form and then think you're going to upload it. You have to actually put all your data in here. It's an application, new or continuation. I think you're fine with new. All the ones with the stars you have to complete. And again, the question is there somebody else within your tribe or organization, the consortium, that takes on some of these forms for you? Does your finance office do components? You need to find that out. Or are they asking you as the director to input all of the information? When you're done with any of these forms before anything can be submitted, um, the forms have to be locked. And so you would hit no, so that way it would be locked. So I'm going to just say yes, that we want it to stay unlocked for data entry. If you need to share access with anyone, you would come here on this participant and you would add either from workspace organization, depending on how things are set up within your entity, or by their username or email address. So this may be like wherein you need to give access to the AOR so they can do the actual submission. That's how you would include them. So if I were going to give access, I don't know, Mary, it's Mary Maruvia or M Maruvia,
mmaruvia@choctaw.org.
right? So then it would search for her by email address, finds her, you then give access all forms including budget, or you give access to all things except non-budget forms. Just really depends. That's how you would add someone, but they have to also be in grants.gov as well. And so it found her. The question I think was on the attachments. Mary, was that what you posted on the listserv?
Yes, I was asking for others' opinions on if attachments to the narrative, if you all were uploading them in that project narrative section or in the that other section below, because I see where it can allow multiple files to be uploaded in the project narrative section, more than just the project narrative.
So typically here, I mean, your the mandatory narrative you would add here. Um, if there are some optional things, there's not a whole lot of guidance in the information on like whether or not your appendix potentially could go as an added attachment here. Um, there's no right or wrong to that extent. That's really your choice. Because it'll upload either way. So your project narrative has a specific spot. Your budget narrative also has a specific spot. That is the mandatory form here. So those both must be there. The bigger question is where does your appendix go? So I think you have an option of either putting it in your project narrative under the optional tab or this other attachments form. But the guidance doesn't tell you one way or another.
And an additional question to that is related to the appendix. And if you're going to have multiple appendix files, let's say you have appendix A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, whichever way you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how it actually is going to come out on the reader's end? Because I know that I've
It
been,
it actually produces them in the order that they are here, which is, for me, my preference is to do the appendix under the other attachments so that it comes last.
that's a good point. But then further than that, I've kind of been uploading mine piecemeal as I get it
Mm-hmm.
ready, but not in the order. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, is
That
it,
doesn't matter.
so it's going to order for the reader in the
It's
correct?
gonna it's gonna order for the reader in the order they are here, starting with the SF424. And in fact, where we see it, where we want to say we want to view the application. So anybody that wants to actually see what the application interface looks like ahead of time, you can do this in here. And I did this already, so I had already requested one. We'll do a download. I'll have to stop sharing so y'all can see it because I don't know that it's going to pop up. Give me 1 second. And you'll see the order it actually generates them, the SF424, and it follows that same format. The lobbying form, the
And I guess I was mainly asking about those appendices because
Right.
if I've got multiple appendices and I'm, let's say it's 1 through 10. And today I finished one, so I uploaded it, and tomorrow I do 10 and I upload it, and next day number 5.
I'm I'm
It,
pretty anal about my appendices. I actually include them all together. I do it all as one solid document so I control the page flow.
oh, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, so you'll see like here's the abstract, which is the same order on the thing, the project narrative. And so then when you actually print it out, it gives this cover sheet and then the actual documents behind them. Budget narrative, same thing, and any documents behind them. Lobbying form and then the other attachment. I try to be as succinct with my pages um, so that there's as much in my control of having things flow in the way I anticipate it to, as opposed to hoping the reader on the other end gets it right. Okay, so Rachel, you said the same thing you've done. So again, if you want to see the full application, you can do that. Especially, if you're old school and you want to see the forms and that kind of stuff and then go in and put them in, that's it. That's an easy way to do it is under here on that view application to be able to do it. But you'll see it actually does flow from top down. Julie, you had your hand raised, Julie?
Sorry, I thought
Oh,
I
you're
unmuted
muted.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the project narrative, is that where we attach the need statements and all of those
Yes.
pages?
Yes.
And is it okay if we number those pages like in a footnote?
I would definitely number those pages.
Okay.
And I do a table of contents so that the individuals can actually see what they're looking for because you're getting scored on those different components. And so I like to break down the components in there in the narrative so that it's as easy as possible for the reader to find the sections and verify that you've responded to each section.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lenore.
And I saw somebody had posted, they actually, on your appendix, I don't remember who posted, that they do the table of contents. Amanda, the table of contents in the appendix as part of the appendix. Myself, I actually probably would, under the project narrative, include it as a page by itself as this optional so that it clearly sits with the narrative. And I tend to have like my page numbers all flow one to the other. So I will have from my project narrative um, down to my budget narrative and the appendices where they flow as steady numbers so that in my narrative, when I'm referring to an exact page, I'm not duplicating page numbers.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What is the difference between the mandatory project narrative file attachment and the optional project narrative file attachments?
So your mandatory project narrative is where you're answering the questions related to the the criteria that you'll be evaluated on. So the first one is need, and significance, quality of the project design. And again, that's the point system that you're evaluated on. So that's your narrative and breaking down those sections. So I'll share a sample table of the contents that may help.
So I got the part about the mandatory project narrative file, like I get that. I'm just not understanding the optional project.
Optional is if you choose to, it's not required components, but myself, what I said I would do on the optional on the project narrative is to have my table of contents. So the reader knows where to find sections. Sorry, Al, I'm trying to get to. Sometimes I think I need 3 screens instead of 2. I'm going to pull up a table of contents just so we can look at it. And I will say that's not a right or wrong. That's just what works for me. Is somebody asking a question? I'm sorry. My computer's deciding to be fickle right now.
Well, yeah, they're gonna include them in the fall gardening shit.
Somebody under Tina Jenin is talking.
Okay.
Um,
Tina, are you trying to ask a question? If not, I'll mute you. Okay. Okay, we're gonna try to get to it, but my computer's kind of fritzing out. Not a good time to do that while we're trying to record. We'll come back. Let's see. Oh, we might be moving now. Sorry about that. Anybody have any questions, burning questions, things you want to make sure we cover while I'm looking for that?
I have a question. What are the requirements for an advisory board? Do we have to include that in our project narrative, like our plans for that?
It's not specifically required that you must have an advisory board. I would say where many people include that is in the section. Let me find it here. So under quality of project services, there is a section under there that talks about the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed projects are appropriate to the needs of the intended recipients or beneficiaries of the services. And then 2, the likely impact of the services to be provided by the project on the intended recipients. And the extent to which the services to be provided involve the collaboration of appropriate partners. And in there, I think is where the bigger part is talking about the individuals, consumers that we're serving actually being engaged in the project design. Let me see under the project design if there's a specific so the extent to which, so under quality of the project design, it also addresses that. Number 2, the extent to which the design of the proposed project is appropriate to and will successfully address the needs of the target population or other identified needs. And again, it's about having that consumer interaction in those processes in the project design. And so for many people, they do that through an advisory board. For some programs, advisory boards have been exceptionally successful. For others, it hasn't, and there's been alternatives in how that may be done. There should be some level of effort that engages consumers and gaining their feedback in relation to how your program operates, though.
Okay, that answers my question a lot, other than, so what are other programs doing in replacement of an advisory board? I believe we did try an advisory board years ago and it just fizzled out. And then COVID happened and nothing happened after that, so.
Does anybody want to share their approaches if they're different than an advisory board? I can share for us, advisory board never really worked exceptionally well for us. It never got off of the ground exceptionally well. And so Amanda said an action committee as needed is what they use. We proposed, and we had been on hold because of COVID, because we couldn't gather. And as well as we had a hurricane, and so we've not had meeting space to be able to do this, but we would have an annual focus group meeting with consumers to be able to share successes, challenges, and gain feedback. And then we'd actually have a third party independent person to come in. That's our proposal, is they come in and being able to gather more like consumer satisfaction feedback, what's working, what's not. Because sometimes people may also be very hesitant to tell you the truth of, are you really meeting their needs, or this worked, this didn't. So we actually have like a separate person from our staff do that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks, Amanda, for sharing that.
For CANA, we do focus groups in our village communities to get feedback from our consumers who, like, we are not, seeing consistently in person. And then we also do like consumer satisfaction surveys. And then we do an external evaluation as well.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so with the external evaluation, I'm kind of new, so I know with us they want someone that's outside, an independent evaluator, but it says non-tribal. So I don't know what if it's good to keep sticking with that or go back to tribal. I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to get a better idea on how to word it, I guess you could say.
So there's nothing in the guidelines that say you must have an external evaluator. I will say there's a number of us who do. it's an easy way to get feedback on how you're, you know, operating and things moving forward. Because sometimes you're a little too close, you don't see some of the issues or have a that fresh perspective somebody from outside can provide. The issue of whether they're native or not, really, I would say is a internal decision. Myself, I wouldn't lock myself in either way. I am much more concerned that they're qualified to do evaluation as opposed to whether they're native or not. Um, in years past, I will say I think we've had a lot more people that were available to do external evaluation, and there's just not as many folks these days. Yeah, yeah. So I hope that helped. Bobby, you have your hand up?
Yeah, question in relation to advisory boards. You know, does anyone have any of their state DVR representatives sitting on their advisory boards?
Anybody with functioning advisory boards can provide some feedback?
Bobby, this is Mary. We have in the past, I don't have an active state person now. They have come from time to time when we have covered some specific focus group topic that I wanted to invite someone in, but I don't have a stable person that comes each and every meeting now. But I think it's a great idea. I just haven't had the person to invite yet.
Hi, this is Nicole. I'm the director at Mashantucket Pequot Tribal VR, and we do have a very active advisory council. And we do have representatives from our state agencies that sit on our board, and they've been very helpful. It's been helpful for us to connect with them and do some case shares. And I also sit on their rehab councils as well, because we cover Rhode Island and Connecticut. So, so that's been helpful in facilitating that relationship and keeping our memorandum of understanding up to date and everything like that. So.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Any feedback on Nicole, since you have a successful one, either you or Mary, on like, are there certain secrets on keeping it going? It is a struggle. It is a struggle because it takes effort and it's kind of finding the right mix. Any feedback for folks? This is the time you're rewriting yourself right now. So
I think we do it quarterly, and I think it took a while to kind of get that established, but they want us to participate. They need Native Americans on their advisory board and their state rehab councils. So because they want that representation, they want to reciprocate with us and keep that relationship open. So in recent years, we've helped our Office of Rehab Services in Rhode Island with determining how they're going to word their booklets and information about tribal VR. So, you know, it's just a matter of appointing a liaison for us. We just happen to be, I guess, lucky to have a state states that are interested in representation of our population and also, you know, cooperating with us. So.
Thank you. Right, any other questions? Okay, my computer is still giving me fits, so I'll continue to keep trying to work at it. But if not, if we don't have any other questions, do we need to go back to the grants.gov portal for anybody and review anything?
I've got a quick question, Lenore.
Sure.
For what did I put? I put it in the I gotta read what I put. Now I can't even find it. there we go. Other than the budget and the budget narrative, where else would we put the amount that we're asking for?
I don't know that you need to. Let me pull up the grants.gov again.
Okay, because I've just been looking off of our previous grant application and I didn't see it anywhere there, but I want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm not missing something.
I don't know that you have to be so explicit. Let's see. To share here. Let me open it back up again. So the preprint forms will have it, so you have it on the, and I'm actually going to go where we can view the application because it'll be easier to see them all at once. Okay. Are you guys seeing the forms?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the SF424, when you get to page 3 is when you address, you'll put in your federal and your match for your total. Then I don't have it on this form. Then the non-construction, this is also part of the SF424, but section A, this is where you break down by your major categories, your cost, here over through year 1 through 5 with your totals. You do need to include what an indirect cost rate you have and what that may be, and identifying that, answering these questions. And then section B is your non-federal, where and how that's applied. Section D, we've previously covered. It actually states in the announcement, there is no limitation on your administrative expenses, so you don't have to complete section D. The abstract doesn't specifically say that you identify what you're asking for. Myself, if I were included, I'd put what your total for the 5 years are, because the abstract again is intended to be a summary. Your project narrative, I typically don't talk about numbers and funding at that, but your budget narrative will, and you'll have your breakdown. So, and people have done this one of two ways. They either do separate budget for year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or they do a combined budget that breaks it down by the year. I've done them both ways. It just really depends what your preference is. There's nothing that requires it broken down a specific way. Now, your budget narrative should include, though, is either that it includes your federal budget as well as your non-federal. So you should have them both included in there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lenore.
Yep. But other than that, there really is not a specified place that you're breaking down budget numbers. Anything else on the grants.gov site? Is everybody feeling comfortable with that? Okay. All right. So let me stop my sharing. I'm actually going to try to pull up the grant package. So this lovely reading that we all have, if you're nice and tired, that looks you're nice and tired, you're having insomnia, it's the best way to get some sleep. That and federal regulations. I am so sorry, y'all. My computer is just like flipping out here. Okay, does someone else have handy the announcement that they can share? It's not letting me share my screen.
I've got it up.
You've got it. Jacob, can you share the announcement? And thank you. I appreciate it. Yep. Okay. So if we go over, so that just breaking down this announcement. Yes.
I'm sorry. I just figured out the headset. I put it in the chat also.
Oh, okay.
It's Amanda. Thanks.
Okay. No problem. The first part is the letter of invitation. And what I do want to say, last time we had a question because there was a contradictory section where it talked about, and let me find it. I did message August about it. Let me find it in my emails. So there was issues as it relates to in the Dear Applicant letter, section A on page 2, it says that the competition is subject to Executive Order 12372. But when you actually get into the actual application, section B4, application and submission information, number 2 states that the competition is not subject to that executive order. And why this is significant is you have to indicate whether or not this applies in the SF 424. So I did get clarification from August that Executive Order 12372 is not in effect for the AIVRS program, since it directly applies to state governments and not tribal governments. So the section here that Jacob has identified, that highlight, that's incorrect. It is not subject to Executive Order 12372. Yeah, go ahead and make your note, Jacob. You're good. You can do whatever you need to.
My note on paper.
So, find it. I thought I had it open. On the next section that actually goes through the notice inviting application for new awards, it'd be wonderful if they numbered the pages. They did not. So it goes through a lot of the things that are the preprint. We want to jump into where you address the narrative, which is starts at section 5, application review information. There we go. Yep. So this breaks down the selection criteria. So it's the maximum score of 10 points. As existing programs, you do get some priority points. So I guess if you had a perfect score, you can score over 100. And so A, need for project significance is the first one. And B, quality of the project design, 20 points. C is quality of the project services, that's 20 points. D is quality of the project personnel, 15. E, quality, adequacy of your resources, 10 points. F, quality of the management plan, 15 points. Quality of the project evaluation is 10 points, G. So that's the criteria you're evaluated on. So that is also how you would identify and should break down your I can't get this to- Oh, look, there you go. There's your table of contents. Thank you, Jacob. Yep. So identifying where a reviewer can see each of these sections and find them. This is a large competition. So we know there's 44 to 45 programs that are up for funding. What we don't know is how many applications each reviewer is going to be asked to review. So you may have some fatigue going on with reviewers. So you never want to assume that they're automatically going to get everything. So I always try to make things as easy as possible for a reviewer. So being able to find, and as well as they know, because they're going to have to rank and score everybody on this, is being able to make these sections very clear for them to find, and they know where to go look for them. So if they missed it and and they've got to go back, oh, where is that section? I don't remember what they said. It's easy for them to go back and do that, and they have the reference for that.
Lenore, do you know if any of these changed from from 5 years ago? The sections, are they all the same?
I don't believe so. I think they are still significantly the same. In the past, their need and significance were two separate, and those were joined together a number of years ago. And look, only counting for 10 points. However, the problem lies, and so that's A. If you want to go back to A, thank you so much, Jacob. Is although it's 10%, a lot of your other sections flow from the need and significance of the project. And so the last thing you want to do on this section is kind of phone it in and say, oh, it's only worth 10 points. I can give away, or we'll focus on the areas that have higher points. The problem lies is all of your other sections build upon the need and significance you've identified here. And so this is the area where you want to talk about the magnitude of the needs. So where are the gaps within your programs and in your communities of why people can't access the services? What is the disabling rate in your community? Do you know and have that data? This is where you really want to wow the reader with the data and how well you know your community. The last thing I think anybody wants is that these are cookie cutter applications. They're supposed to be reflections of your community. And so being able to hit upon the things that are unique for your community that may prevent folks from engaging or being connected in that. So, and as well as everyone on this call is with an existing program. So you have a pool of information of data on within your existing program as well. So what types of disabilities do you see primarily that have come through your doors and that kind of stuff? And so being able to hone in on those kinds of things really tells that tale, and grant writing is a lot like storytelling. You're really wanting to get that point across of what's within that. So the extent of the gaps. So why is your state numbers not as high, or why are you better positioned to do that? This is the time to toot your horn on the work you've done. Let's see, we've got some posts. Okay, Amanda. Yeah, so Jacob's talking about asking for the state numbers. Absolutely. We actually do a comparison side by side of our success rates compared to the state. And our success rates tend to be higher, than the state. Now, the nice thing is you're controlling the story. If the state is outperforming you, you don't want to put that. It's your story to tell. To that extent. Now, and the other thing becomes is the state being successful because you're joint case sharing every case. And so if you're taking on the bulk of like the day-to-day communication and that kind of stuff, those are things that are going to be important. So tell those stories. Then the potential contribution of the project. How are you increasing knowledge and understanding of rehab problems, issues, and strategies? I know one of the things for our communities, like we have to convince people like they have disabilities, which sounds really weird, but they because it's not something that's discussed in our community to those extent. Everybody contributes in whatever ways they can. And so the whole thought of the stigma of what exists of the word disability is huge. And so, to be American Indian and then a disability on top of that, for some people, it's just too much. So being able to talk through those things, and this also, again, like number 3 plays into later on where you may talk about your outreach strategies and how you provide disability awareness in your community. So again, although it's 10 points, it connects and ties back into those other sections. Also, the extent to which the proposed project is to build local capacity to provide, improve, or expand services that address the needs of the target population. So what and how are you able to do that? And again, as existing programs, we're in a unique position to be able to talk about what we've already done and what and how we may look at improving some of those things. So for data, is anybody struggling with accessing data to build their needs section, needs and significance? Or does everybody feel like they've got the data part down pretty well?
Our data is just tough because we don't have great data for our region. We have a lot of transient fishermen that were counted census data in some communities, but not all communities, and it throws it throws like unemployment rates into weird places for our region, because some places it shows we have almost 100% employment rates because cannery workers were counted. That accounts for 95% of the population then of the and then in others. So just looking at that data.
So let me ask you, as far as data, and you guys are up in Alaska, correct, Jacob? So, part of the challenge I think becomes is there like a single IHS source to give you some health data? I would also talk about subsistence because that's quite different than a lot of folks. So, like looking at how many of your cases may close due to subsistence. And you know, I don't know how that may differ from the state agency, but if the approach you guys have to subsistence is much more culturally appropriate than the state, you want to hone in on that and raising that forward. Because again, that's why sometimes some states are just not successful in tribal communities because they don't have the ability to pivot and customize culturally the way we can.
Yeah, we focus on geography and that there's no state office in our region. Um, uh, Also on the recency of the historical trauma at government's hands too. We talk about and that there's a lack of trust with state or federal agencies. Um, and then just that we're a tribal organization, so all of our boards from our communities.
Anybody else?
Hi. I'm struggling with data with trying to get like a total of participants we served with all the grants we had, the past grants we had. I try to dig around in the offices, but it's been hard getting that stuff. So but I asked my rep and he hasn't gone back with me yet.
So where are you getting data? I'm sorry, y'all. I have my
Oh,
supervisor
it's like
trying to get
from
information.
like all the past participants we served, like with all the reports and like all the grants we held. That's where I'm
Gotcha.
at. Yeah.
Are you a grant writer or are you the director?
I'm the director, but I'm working along with a grant writer.
Okay. So one of the things for any of you guys that are using any of the data management systems, you should be able to fairly easily go into, those systems and generate reports. And look, those systems work as well as we work them, to that extent. But even if you go back and look at your previous reports and that kind of stuff, it's not lost on me the challenges for some of your internal data given COVID. So your data is going to look a bit like a roller coaster where you may have been doing fine, drop down, and you're trying to climb back up. Don't be afraid to talk about that, and because acknowledging it, may help a reader in understanding why there's dips. To that extent and what and how and look, if you succeeded exceptionally well during COVID, toot that horn because that definitely is was great, and how you may have pivoted to be able to continue to serve people to do that. The census is a source. One of the things is trying to drill it down to specific areas that can be hugely challenging. Just depends on your area and how well you can fine tune it. To that extent, we actually do, and we implemented that after we were funded because we didn't have the greatest source of information that was tribal specific because nobody's keeping it. And so then we took the initiative every 5 years and we do an internal community needs assessment and we track disabling conditions and basic household data and some other factors, that, and seeing how that changes over time. So we've done that as well. Yeah. Any other questions about the need and significance area? Okay, let's move on to quality of the project design. And again, it flows out of the needs. So if you talked about specific types of disabilities you see in the community, let's say, you're talking about, 30% of your caseload are individuals with substance use and abuse issues, co-occurring disorders, and whatnot. But then, like, when you get into your goals, your design, and you're talking about goals and objectives, and they jump to talking about serving people with physical disabilities, but that's not necessarily the majority of people. It's got to flow. It's got to show those connections to things to that extent. There is no right or wrong of how many goals you have. Some programs have multiple goals. Some programs have one goal. What I will say is the consistent for most programs is to have the goal of comprehensive. I gotta pull out my old grant here. To provide comprehensive services, culturally appropriate vocational rehabilitation services to eligible American Indians with disabilities who reside within plug in your area, consistent with their strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, and informed choice. So they may prepare for, maintain, and obtain gainful employment. We're pulling that stuff right out of regulations. And so most people, that is goal number one. And it identifies, how many people do you propose to serve every year, and how many closures, but as well as any other things that you may want to specifically identify would go in line with that. Some folks have had goals related to transition students. I've seen that before. There's no right or wrong. It really just needs to make sense for your program. When you're designing your program, the last thing you want to do is, and this is what I will say, is looking at your goals and objectives, is they always talk about them being SMART. And so SMART meaning specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. And so having that in place is important. Couple of pitfalls I would say I've learned over time is not to have an objective related to somebody else doing something that I have no control over. So you may have a great partnership with an entity, and that they're going to help you do something. They have a change in administration, and then boom, that partnership's gone. And you can't move your initiative forward because it requires that other entity to do something, and you can't control whether they do it or not. I would not tie myself to that. I've done it before. It's no fun. So being able to make sure that's in line to that extent. one of the other things is, do you want to tie yourself to tracking and following those things? You know, you're going to be married to those goals and objectives for 5 years. You can change them, but being clear, do you want to marry yourself to a specific effort or initiative for a particular length of time? So being thoughtful to that extent. Other things outside of how many people you serve and closures or things related to outreach, community disability education, for folks that may have a stronger staffing system related to job development and placement, they may have some specific goals and objectives to that end. Again, it's all about where your design works and fits for your community. So are there any questions, or is anybody kind of struggling with whether they should or shouldn't in a particular element? And so again, the number one there, the extent to which goals, objectives, and outcomes to be achieved by the proposed project are clearly specified and measurable. That's making sure your goals and objectives are SMART. To the extent to which the design of the proposed project is appropriate and will successfully address the needs. So again, going back and connecting to the needs of the target population or other identified needs. And then number three, the extent to which the proposed project will establish linkages with other appropriate agencies and organizations. Now, this doesn't necessarily, because this is narratively you talking about your goals and objectives. So talking about partnerships you may have and how they may help you in achieving it is not going to lock you in. However, being able to make sure those are strong relationships. Now, typically the folks you're going to talk about in here that you're establishing linkages for this service population, you're normally going to have letters of support from them. Support and commitment. That's the folks that are going to link to that end.
On the goals and objectives, should you put in GIPRA could you put in GIPRA measures?
So most people have put the measures as it relates to the number of people they're going to serve compared to closures. This is the first time we're seeing some of the GEPRA measures changing. I don't think it's a bad thing. That's kind of your call, though. It's not specified that you have to.
Because that's what, honestly, like in the past, that's what it's been. Just like you said, one goal and very few objectives, and it was pretty much those GIPRAs. But last time we were writing, I travel grant writer, and like those new ones with the percentages, with the money at 10,000 and the 35,000, those are something measured by RSA. So that's not really a measurable goal objective,
right
for us, would it be?
No, I wouldn't. I would not put that in your narrative.
Okay, but the other ones, those.
Unless somebody's extraordinarily efficient, but I think again, like it doesn't get to these sections where it talks about like connecting it to the need. I think it's just one of those things as directors we have to keep in the back of our head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, there's questions about the page number requirements. It's been years that there's actually been a page number requirement. I have not seen one on this announcement. I would say be cautious about staying within, and we've pushed our numbers over the last couple of years, and because again, the reader, you definitely don't want hundreds of pages for sure, because the reader is going to be overwhelmed and they're going to tap out. 40 to 45, you know, is pushing it, I think, you know, but I want to say, I think last time they had page number limits, that was the page that you couldn't be any more than 45 pages. But that's also been a number of years. Yeah, so 35 to 40, yeah. It's a challenge. It's a challenge because you want to be able to answer each of the sections, and being thorough in your responses. And look, as you're writing, it's the joy of grant writing, is you repeat the same thing and just trying to figure out a new way to say, I already told you that. You know, so if as you're writing your grant, if you're feeling like, why do I have to answer this question again? That's the nature of grant writing. It's one of the things that are actually built in to make sure there's consistency in these processes. But you feel like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say. Okay, here's what I have to say. And now I'm going to summarize what I just said. You feel like you're doing that in this process. So don't get caught up in feeling like, it's maybe too much. To that extent, it's intended to be repetitive, because again, you're stringing that theme throughout it and along the way. Okay. Any other questions on the quality of the project design?
Mine isn't really for the project design, but it's overall. So when we have, like, we cite our data in the project narrative, are we supposed to have like a separate page at the end, or maybe an appendix stating where we got our data?
I mean, you can, it just depends to the extent and how robust your data sharing is.
Okay. Thank you.
I typically will include it as I'm writing, so I'll, you know, put like, you know, from the XXX, you know, whatever, or identifying state of Louisiana has reported such and such, or it just, you know, I mean, a lot of research grants are like hugely extensive on cited work. Ours, I would say probably not so much. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the quality of the project services. So again, like, understanding that we are required to provide services that are comparable to state agencies. This is also the area you want to talk about what and how you are tailoring services to your community. So there are some things that shouldn't be surprising. So, you know, some of this section also is, so you'll see there where it talks about the secretary considers the quality and sufficiency of strategies for ensuring equal access. You've got to make an assurance statement there that you're going to ensure equal access and treatment for eligible participants who are members of your area that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, disability. So number one, though, the extent to the services to be provided by the proposed project are appropriate to the needs. So again, reflecting back to the needs of the intended recipients or beneficiaries. So if you spent time in the needs section talking about language barriers being problematic, then you want to talk about how you're going to overcome those language barriers in your provision of services. So is there anyone in your staff, or you have a number of staff members who are traditional speakers and are able to communicate with consumers in their own language, and being able to do that, if that's a huge consideration. It's interesting, just the issues of languages, even though when for folks that their native language may not be their first language, they found like with children after so many generations, they still think in that language. To a certain extent, it kind of gets passed down. It's very interesting. And then the likely impact of the services to be provided. So here you get to dig in really deep. Number two, on how your culturally competent services are just the best thing around. You know, because again, it's what and how we're able to differentiate ourselves. And so to the extent that you are able to address service provision in such a way that is culturally competent, so being able to help and assist with traditional religious practices and traditional healing that may take place, you know, as part of someone's individualized plan for employment is important. And what that may look like, you know, that's going to look very different for, say, someone up in Alaska compared to Timothy in Oklahoma, compared to Paula in Navajo, you know. And so don't be afraid to immerse where your culture fits in there. And then three, the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project involve the collaboration of appropriate partners for maximizing the effectiveness of your project services. So are there, so you've already talked about some partners, but again, where do your partnerships fit in? Or there, and again, this is the piece that's talking about your project services. So, and we're talking about how you may be unique and being able to mix that. Is there a match of partnerships? So does your tribe have an elders council that maybe you can consult with for traditional healing or whatever the case may be, in an established relationship to be able to do that and make those connections? Those are the pieces that oh, so Amanda, you said this section differs from 5 years ago. What changes are you seeing?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I had the description as question number 1. Now, question number 1 is actually what used to be 2A 5 years ago. And then 2B 5 years ago is now number 2. And 2C 5 years ago is number 3.
So we wrote 3, we're in year 3 on our grant. That's what I'm actually pulling up ours. One was talking about ensuring equal access. So that statement that's under C. Yeah, and then we had a 2A, 2B, 2C. Yeah, Definitely much more extensive.
That's also where I put GEPA and GEPRA. But now we have a standalone form for GEPA.
Right.
Should we still address it here or no?
So how did you answer GEPA in just saying you were going to be compliant? Was it a just kind of assurance statement, or did you go into detail?
It was more of an assurance statement.
There's nothing wrong with repeating an assurance statement. Just make sure it fits and makes sense and doesn't like stick out like a sore thumb.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking at our number 2B. We talked about the impact of services. So we actually talked about like how many people we were proposing to serve that would then be achieving outcomes and that kind of stuff. So reiterating some of our overall numbers as well. It just looks like a little bit of a restructure for the most part, but I don't think it's changed significantly.
And quality of project personnel, D, is different from 5 years ago. I literally just put the documents side by side, my paper documents, because I'm out of town right now.
Yeah,
and checked off.
The titles are still somewhat the same. They're just moved and shifted around though. So I don't think it's now the last thing what you don't want to do is completely copy and paste your grant from 5 years ago and think it's going to transition over, because that is not going to work. Yeah, that's why you've got to, do this. The other thing I would urge you in taking the time with your grant is this is the time to retool yourself. You can actually get rid of things that don't work, put in things that you want to do differently. This is the time to do that. So being able to evaluate what's working and what doesn't is huge. Yeah. Any other questions on that quality of project services? So I'm looking at y'all comments. We've got 8 minutes before we're scheduled to wrap. So we can move on to quality of project personnel, or if anybody, because I know there are some folks that are getting close to having to turn in things to their council, administration. If anybody has any kind of hot burning questions right now, we can field those or we move on. Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay, so let's move on then to quality of the project person. Oh, we've got a hand up. Is it Zhao?
This is Zhao from Panonia Pulmonation Smoke Rehab Program. My question related to GEPA. I went on the grants.gov and it has a form that need to be filled with like 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 questions, but it also says all applicants for new grant awards must include the following information in their application to address this provision in order to receive funding under this program. So in our case, we are a continuation. Well, what we have been running the program, so it's not a brand new one. So does this mean that section does not have to be filled by us?
You cut in and out. What section are you talking about?
Okay, so it's actually in the grants.gov because earlier you were mentioning GEPRA, and so I just remembered we got online on the grants.gov. It's a standard form
Right.
to be filled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one. So, so this one, basically, if we are an ongoing program, we don't have to deal with this?
No, you have to. Everybody
We do
has
have
to do
to.
it. Yes, everybody has to do it.
Yeah, but it sounds like, for new grant awards, I guess when they say new, it's like when you're doing a whole cycle, it's still new, right?
Yes. Yep. New cycle, new grant. And in the past, everybody has had to do
In
like
the
a
past,
GEPA.
was
In the
this not
past,
even
no,
required?
in the
This is a new
past,
thing?
it was like a one-page document that folks did independently where they did a GEPA assurance. I'm trying to find
Yeah.
my table of contents here.
They share it that I submitted last time.
Let's see. So let's see. I can tell you 3 years ago, we had to do an Ed GEPA 427 form. Let's see, let me find what that looks like. So we had to write up a statement and it was an upload, basically assuring those items, those 4 items, narratively. They've just created a form specifically for it. That's all.
So now they want you to kind of more elaborate on how you're going to do it. Do you have a sample somewhere?
Not to this extent. This is the first time I've seen them do this specific form.
Yeah.
In the past, like I said, it was a one-pager that folks uploaded as a GEPA assurance. What I assume is they probably didn't completely care for everybody's responses, or they felt like they were too vague, so they're kind of forcing people to be more specific related to the GEPA assurances. And basically you're making assurances here. So describe how your entity's existing mission, policies, or commitments ensure equitable access. You'll talk, on like XYZ, ensures equitable access by having a streamlined application you'll talk about your processes and how you don't discriminate in those processes for folks to be able to apply. Based on your proposed project or activity, what barriers may impede equitable access and participation of students, educators, or other beneficiaries. There's nothing, if you don't foresee there being barriers, then there's no barriers. So, the biggest thing on tribal land, what I will say is where this may be a problem for some folks is, issues related to ADA doesn't apply on tribal land. Some tribes have chosen to adopt ADA standards, some have not. So if your VR program is in a location that's not ADA accessible, I would certainly talk about that, because that definitely is a barrier. But then how do you overcome it? Do you have other meeting space that you can go outside of the office that you may connect with people? So how do you work through those barriers? And then based on the barriers identified, the steps that you're going to take to assure their equitable access. So you address that. But again, if there's none, there are no barriers. And what is your timelines to including target milestones for addressing these barriers? So again, it's totally fine to be able to say not applicable. Yeah, but this is an all new form.
Lenore,
Any other questions? Uh-huh.
I put a sample in there. I'm still
Oh,
working on
thank-
it though. In the
Good.
chat.
So, in the chat, okay. A sample in the chat.
It's under Jacob's question or comment. I think it still applies because it is a new grant application, even though we are previously funded.
Yep. Yeah, it does. For the fact that they're highlighted in yellow, you will not be able to submit if that's not completed. I will tell you that right now. Yep. Okay.
Thank you so
Anything
much.
else?
This is very helpful.
No, that's no problem at all. That's why we do
Yeah,
it.
so good.
That's
Yeah,
why
it's
we
always
do it.
great to get some kind of samples to see to what extent they want you to elaborate, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, guys. Well, we are at 3:30. So, or do we have any last questions? If not, we will pick up next week with quality of project personnel. Okay. All right. Well, this week
Thanks,
just flew
Lenore.
by. Yeah, no problem. And hopefully I'll get my computer working for next time. So thank you, Jacob, for stepping in and doing the screen share.
No problem. Yeah, thanks, Amanda, for sharing that. That's super helpful.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.